an STS machine, we highly recommend you using small wire concaves in small grain harvest, wheat type scenarios. With a small wire concave, you notice the wires are narrow spaced together, so we hold that crop mat up against the threshing elements as the threshing elements come by. And keep in mind, a rotor or an STS machine is set up to use material on material to do the threshing, and we don't need to strike iron on iron like we did on the walker or the conventional machine to get the crop threshed. In saying that, the smaller spacing of the wires holds that crop mat up as we talked about earlier, and also these bars slow the crop movement through the machine down so that crop can rub on each other and start the threshing process and allow grain to fall through. If I was in a scenario where I had a high yielding wheat, let's say we got over 70 bushel, maybe into the 80 bushel, and we had a rotor loss when we did a power shutdown and we were having a hard time controlling that rotor loss, I might take a look at, after I've sped up the rotor and tried different adjustments, pulling every other wire out of the rear concave to help open up and give more separation room. We do 90% plus of our threshing is done on the front two concaves, and the third one there is just holding that crop material up, trying to do a final thresh. We have concave cover bands that are available at your parts department as a bundle, and what we'd use those concave cover bands for are small grains that we would have white caps that didn't get quite rubbed off, and we want to clean that white cap situation up, broken heads maybe that are falling through the concaves, or really hard threshing wheat that wants to push through the concave too soon. For clarity of showing you where the concave cover bands would go on a small grain concave, we've laid these on top. Actually, these concave cover bands will go underneath the concave, and they have a bracket and a clean grain elevator type door latch on the left side of the machine that you'll latch them in with this U-shaped U-bolt. And in doing so, they just snap into place for ease of removal and adjusting. When we set up a combine with the rotor that would dump back into the rotor, the tailings elevator that would dump back into the rotor, I would want to set it up with the concave cover bands being in the 1, 2, and the 5th position, being this is the front of the machine and the front concave. You can see how we've got it set up for the 1, 2, and 5th position. In the 1st and 2nd positions, we're going to hold that crop material up as it comes in the rotor and starts its threshing process. Loose grain and from the header and the feed accelerator will sometimes just want to fall through the concaves right there, and holding that up will allow that crop to be rubbed and brought around in the rotation of the rotor. In the 5th position, we have the tailings elevator dumping back in, and that could be a lot of loose, clean grain that isn't got a white, but has a white cap attached, and when that comes through, if it's not got the cover band in place, it's going to fall through the concave and start the cycle again. On S680 and 690 machines, we have the active tailings in the back that does our threshing of the tailings, rethreshing of the tailings for us. In that situation, we are not putting the tailings back to the concave on the 5th position of the 2nd concave. So I would encourage you, with a set of 3 cover bands from the bundle, to install them on the front concave to control that crop that's going to fall through the concave unthreshed. The concave cover bands, as you can see on the 70 series and newer machines, have a removable panel. The removable panel allows us to take a panel out if we have an off-balance situation on our shoe, say we're loaded too heavy on the left or to the right. We could remove one of these panels to help drop the crop in where the lighter side of the machine is having trouble balancing the crop onto the shoe. Prior to the 70 series machines, 50 and 60 series machines, we had a cover band that was a simple piece of sheet metal that covered that spot, just like these with a removable panel. So these are no longer available, but you might have these or see these around, or they came with your machine. They are still just as viable and usable on helping hold that crop up in there and helping clean up white caps or that dirty grain sample. During a power shutdown, if we had a chaffer load that was out of balance, and we've used cover bands and we've helped that portion of it, but we feel like back on the back shaker pan, we've got underneath the separator grates, we've got material that's heavier on the left or heavier on the right. I would encourage you to look at using your separator grate covers that snap into place on the back separator grates to help move that crop from left to right to balance that load. Normally the machine comes out of the factory with 2 rows on the left and 1 row up on the right. In our humidity and our environment that we harvest wheat in this area, most of the time we probably ought to start with them out, because in the beginning of the season we're very tough and very hard threshing crop, and that makes it harder to separate, and we need all the room on the separator grates we can get to help with the threshing and the separating. And these then later, if it dries out or we got a low humidity situation or we have a chaffer imbalance, we can install these to help move that crop left to right. On small wire concaves, a little bit of damage, as you can see here, is not that critical as it is on a walker machine. An STS, you know, we talk about using the material on the material to do the threshing, and these bars merely hold the crop up and slow it down in its process of rolling through that rotor. And a little damage like that is not a big item. On a small wire concave, those wires that we've talked about can wear out, and as you can see, this concave has some flat spots starting to happen, and they're getting a little thin on the leading edge. Those wires can be replaced, and here's a wire. You can just grab them with a vice grip, the head of the nail right here. There's a head on that, and you can pull them out with a vice grip and a hammer. On 9870, S680, and S690 model machines, we have the Pre-Chaffer Extension. The Pre-Chaffer, the shoe augers would be bringing the crop off the concaves, dropping it onto the main chaffer and the Pre-Chaffer, and this Pre-Chaffer Extension sits behind the main Pre-Chaffer up there. And what we found in small grains is the straw and the crop mat and the grain that's mixed in with it lands too far back on the main chaffer behind it at that point, causing a higher loss of grain out the shoe and the machine, dirtier bin sample, and a little bit higher tailings load on the tailings elevator. In small grains, we need to remove this. Do you need to put it back in? If you're in corn up to 200 bushels, or you notice a high grain loss in corn, that you're getting in some high yielding corn and you're getting a higher grain loss, that's what this was built for and meant for. You might try it without in your corn harvest and see if you can get away with it. A lot of guys harvesting in that 200 bushel crop haven't had to put it back in. When we remove it for small grains, we need to remember to put the 4 chaffer finger extensions on the front up here. Where we unbolted this, we would want to put fingers in place of that to keep that crop lifted just a little longer as it lands on the chaffer. There's 4 of them, part number being H132, 161. And also, as we remove this, we want to remember the brackets at the rear of the Pre-Chaffer Extension. The rear of the machine would be behind me, the shoe augers would be in front of me, and these chaffer brackets bolt to the side of the chaffer frame inside. And we want to unbolt one on the left and one on the right side so they don't hold up crop debris flow.